Welcome to today's USP and Pharmatech webinar, PCM Business Cases. Let's get specific. Next. We have an instructor for today's webinar, Richard Steiner, Head of Sales and PCM Practice Lead at Pharmatech Associate. Welcome and thank you to you, and I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Steiner.
Yeah, many thanks for the introduction, and hello everyone. I hope you can all hear me well. And I am very excited actually to go into another chapter about continuous manufacturing. I had already a webinar last year where I walked through to all the unit operations and they're kind of how they work together. So we covered this topic in length technically, and today's session is about, let's get specific with a very important reason. Because if you see today the implementation of continuous manufacturing after many years, after all, a lot of other roadblocks have been removed. We experience that it is still a challenge for some companies to make the business case for this technology. So the technology is there. Also, the reliable technology, as we know, first cases to the market since many years successfully. But yeah, there is still this kind of a business case hurdle, which engineer scientists have to go through when they want to make the case in their company. So this is why I specifically focus today on how to make this business case. We see in particular four unique needs as this industry, let's say, is on a very high level segmented in four groups, from innovators, CDMOs, generics, and OTC manufacturers. What they all have in common, and independently from what company you are working for, this is basically a graphic of that, is your primary and your supportive activities. For some, one is a little bit more, a little bit bigger. For others, it is maybe a little bit more complex because you have more of these value-adding steps in between. But why is this important to make this a topic for a business case assessment? Before you even start to think about a business case, you have to be sure which of these areas are actually involved in continuous process implementation. Is it just an exercise you do in your production? Is it an exercise which also involves inbound, outbound logistics, technology development? So this has all deep impact on your business case. So in a higher level, you have to do a proper analysis of the value chain of your specific company. And this is, I think, a very essential step before you even monetize or want to monetize the benefits of continuous manufacturing. So being aware of this, of your company's value chain and which areas may get involved considering implementation of a continuous process. This deeply roots also in the competitive space your company is in. So for an innovator company, pipeline, time to market, supply chain may be the driving forces for a case to stay competitive in their environment. For a CDMO, it's slightly different. Tech transfer, clinical supply, commercial scale out, expanding your service portfolio. So you see already between these two segment groups, the business needs are different and consequently the requirements, and finally the business case calculation. So for OTCs, and last but not least, generics, where the competitiveness is more in the price versus cost the productivity and the life cycle extension. So you see already on this very simplistic graphics that economic assessments are complex, and that's a good reason also why you see little data and reports out there in the market, because of course these are all deeply competitive information to disclose. So, but now let's say you are in the engineering department or in your R&D group. You think from your technical perspective, continuous manufacturing makes sense. Besides showing the justification that this works, you have now to also become a kind of an accountant on your own. So what to do, how to make the business case. And I will give you a pretty simple tool to start with. So independently also from whether we talk about a drug substance or a drug product process train, you have unit operations. Each of these unit operations have specific efficiencies. You can use operational equipment efficiency calculations as an example to benchmark these unit operations. So you will know from your experience that some of the unit operations in the process you have in mind have different efficiencies. So when you run this in a batch-like operation, it doesn't matter so much. You do one step, the intermediate goes to the next step, to the next step. Basically, you have one after the other. If you combine this, mathematically very simple, you see the inefficiency basically in a number, because you have to multiply these OEEs, which shows the handicap of a batch operation, unless you sequence one of these units in a campaign or so. But in a nutshell, and that's the point, you want to compare a process. You want to compare an existing batch process to a continuous operation. And the big difference is that in a continuous operation, each of the unit operations are linked to one another. Doesn't matter if this is 2 or 3, how long your process chain or train will look like. It has to follow the most efficient part of it. So that's the inherent advantage of any continuous manufacturing. So you gain productivity, or you should gain productivity to make your business case. You can use the OEE as an example, just to note it's all about the availability of the equipment, the performance of the process, and the yield, of course, which makes the quality part of this equation. Now, one tool is net present value. For usually engineers, scientists, etc., this is not just this is not a number you usually are confronted with, but you may hear this acronym many times. Rate of return, return on investment versus net present value. First of all, you have to understand the only difference here is really the time. So net present value takes into account the investment over the cash flow of this investment you generate with this investment over time. So it's basically discounting the time and bring the time into consideration. Everyone from us knows usually you have depreciation schedules to follow 8, 10 years. So and so you basically put this into the equation. You say I have an initial investment A at a given time 0, and then you add basically for the years to come what this asset is generating on cash flow for your company. So it's a financial cash flow based equation. So return on investment or rate of return difference is basically you take the time off. You say, I want to have this amortized in just a year. If we now want to compare assets or technologies, it can be any kind of technology you bring in to your company, not necessarily just continuous equipment. But let's say you have batch process train and you want to compare this with a continuous process train. Whatever is the starting point of the investment, the value of this particular asset, you put it here in initial investment space. And then, as mentioned, the cash flow, the difference of the cash flows between these both assets. You zoom more deeper in. So how to assess now the cash in for this unit or for this continuous process and the cash out. It's basically pretty simple. So the capacity you can sell. So whatever, let's say, how many million tablets you intend to produce on this equipment, time the market price for this product A. Subtracted by, again, capacity sold and all the variable expenses related to this product A, plus fixed expenses for this product. So this is how I think on a paper, on an Excel sheet, you can pretty easily determine this part. The same you do for your second technology, the batch technology, for example. And so you have a difference. So you have a difference in the initial investment costs. You have a difference in cash in over time. And yeah, this gives you the net present value. And then you can see whether this or the other technology has a benefit. Usually, and that's why I mentioned before the OEE, the efficiency of your process goes into the capacity of manufacture, or you can theoretically manufacture on your asset. So here you will see a difference. Not so much in the market price, of course. You will see with this capacity difference between these both units, also changes and differences in the delta in the variable expenses, whether those are energy costs, operators involved, or whatever it is. But you will see, of course, there are differences also in the material consumption you need, of course. So there are some areas in this equation where you will have a delta and some areas where you do not have any change at all. When it comes to the fixed part of the equation, and this is also many times discussed, depreciation methods play a role. So here, of course, you need to decide and you have to look into, or you have to understand that talking about depreciation, it's always important to know what is the depreciation schedule and not just simply assuming, oh, I have this asset, it's depreciated already. No, you have to have a closer look to what means depreciation in this aspect. You have to go to the balance sheet. You have to see what are the depreciation schedules, because you can adapt these depreciation schedules also on the purpose of this equipment or for whatever reason you have employed this equipment. So there are some variations possible to consider, and they have impact on the net present value for sure. So this is a very important equation. This is why I leave it a little bit on the screen. Highlighting the most important element is you compare technologies. You not necessarily want to convert the reality of your current process into this equation, considering all your company's effects around it. but you compare basically technologies. How does this now look like if I apply this kind of, I call it scenario technique, to the business cases and to the 4 different segments? Going to the large cap innovators. So we learned over the years that mainly the business cases for them are driven by time to market and supply chain agility. These are the major arguments we have collected. There are many elements which can influence the time to market. I do not want to talk through to all of those. You can see them then later in the handout. But time to market is of essence for the most of the innovator products. Supply chain agility is also one of the arguments I hear many times. So now the question is how to monetize this kind of business case elements. For small cap innovators, it's a bit different. So they have more the financial risk on top of it because these are usually smaller companies with smaller capital expenditure possibilities. They have also usually a smaller product portfolio, limited resources, and more regulatory risk. So for a small cap innovator, before say time to market remains as an argument, but they have additional risks on top of large innovators. So you have to mitigate these risks. So consequently, your business case calculation will look very much different. Mitigating risk can be collaborating with vendors on initial trials so that they do not have to buy equipment in the first place, or to partner with a CDMO to lower also this financial risk. You go into scale out discussions, etc. This is just an example. But back to my numbers now. It all starts with sales expectations. So let's assume you have a new product, you go on into the market launch, you supply it to the market, it is well accepted, and you do this with your existing batch equipment. You may ask now, what is different if I would have a continuous equipment? And we see with the continuous equipment, you basically can expect to be earlier to the market with the product if you have the asset. This is an important distinction here. Yeah? So if you have the asset, let's say you can make advantage in your development time, in your tech transfer. So if you take these benefits in account, you have in some instances, you have also an advantage in your regulatory filing for a few months. So if you take this all into consideration, you can assume that with the continuous manufacturing equipment, you can roll out faster, you ride the wave of success a little bit faster, you can peak your sales, and with this, your market share. There are cases, I just want to name here the Trikafta product from Vertex, which was mentioned. They could make it in 3.5 years from their initial R&D work to the market. They gained tremendous success with this product, which is reported all over. And yeah, this is a nice example, but also saying that at this time, Vertex already gained a lot of experience by using continuous manufacturing on earlier products until they have been in the position to ride this so high. But in a nutshell, time to market means gaining peak sales and market share. If I go back now to my net present value calculation over time, how would this look like? So let's assume you do not have an asset, you start thinking about it. So the net present value for continuous manufacturing system over, let's say, 10 years may look like this. So you have in the first 2.5 years, you have to pay for the asset until this asset is ready and your product is ready to the market. This is why you most likely will see a negative net present value at the beginning. If someone has already a batch equipment, and this is the handicap for many business cases of Conti, if someone has already a batch equipment in place, usually they have the benefit that these first 2.5 years or 3 years until the Conti system is online is not the problem, so they can roll out faster, but they might have later a scaling issue where continuous manufacturing system could gain positive net present value overall. Having the Conti system already in place, of course, with the peak sales and the market share to consider, will give you a much higher leverage for your net present value over the time. Again, these are scenarios which you can run through by applying this calculation I showed you before. And it is, I think, worthwhile doing this exercise to understand what are the driving parameters for your success. So not just assuming, but really putting this into numbers and structure this in a way that you can see what your net present value is doing over the time, and not just focusing on 1 year, because it is an investment which lasts for longer and which give you the inherent positive effect maybe just after a time. So as always, as everybody knows, if you're successful privately or business-wise, it's a matter of timing as well sometimes. So you need to have the right timing. And this is why this scenario technique is so helpful to give you some guideline and guidance. So this was the innovator case. Before said company segment. There's the supply chain agility part, which I also want to highlight quickly. So everyone knows if your stock keeping units are high, if you have a lot of products in your warehouse sitting, you have a risk and also a very high cost, in particular if the supply is kind of interrupted. Flexible batch sizes are here one key element why large innovators are looking into this technology and say, okay, by the help of continuous manufacturing system, we have more flexibility and efficiency, and we can also reduce our safety stock units, and we can also dramatically avoid costs for maybe discarded batches, etc. So this is why the argument about supply chain agility is so important to look at. Simple case. So let's say you have a unit batch process, 1 shift a day. You can calculate, let's say, in 5 days, 5 million tablets. If you do the same in 2 shifts a day, we'll end up with 10 million. But if you run this continuously, day out, day in, about 5 days, you have 50 million tablets. Just a simple explanation why, to what scale this kind of continuous process can drive your productivity. Now, in numbers again, I change the x-axis because I say, okay, I want to scale it about the batch size. I want to see how the net present value over this 10 years for a given product and a scenario, how will the net present value be developed? Batch versus Conti. So same product, batch train versus a Conti train. You may wonder, there's a culmination point. What is about this section here? Basically here, the net present value of the Conti system is equally beneficial as for the batch system. For the moment, you will say, oh, there's a specific batch size where batch is equally beneficial than Conti. Yes, and this has to do with the batch size, but also with the flexibility on your equipment. If you go beyond this point, the batch equipment will create a better net present value just because of the sheer difference in the investment, in the initial investment. So we know that continuous equipment versus batch equipment has a premium price. And that's the difference here. The question is, can I leverage this? Yes, I can. If I run this Conti equipment with a higher operational equipment efficiency and maybe more shifts and over 24/7 as an example. So you can balance out this handicap of a higher investment by driving the productivity. You can sell more, you can produce more, and then deliver more to the market. And with this, you can showcase here on this graph where is the most efficient way to operate the equipment. You can play around with different OEE scenarios, and then you will come up with that. In the case the assets, the batch and the Conti assets would have the same price, this will give the dotted line basically. So here the idea is to showcase what is the optimum batch size to run this equipment for a given price and a given product portfolio. Another example how to basically give a good monetization of continuous equipment. Let's go to generics. This is a pretty challenging business case, as many know. There are, let's say, old beliefs saying, oh, continuous manufacturing is not really competitive or good to use for generics. You can't say this that simple. You have to make a deep dive. We also know that this is a hard way to introduce. This is like telling a chef, okay, you can't use your KitchenAid anymore. You have to use a more sophisticated Thermomix as an example. So you will not create a lot of happiness here if you want to change technology for a given recipe. There's resistance to change. But I think the real answer is you have to look into the product portfolio, the pressure of your gross margin. You have to look into your general situation before you make just an estimation saying, okay, the GM is the main problem. With continuous equipment, you can solve many problems if you have maybe specific quality issues in one of the unit operations. Consider this. Maybe this will help you to drive the productivity. There are cases, and I know in particular regional generic companies, if they have, for example, a problem in their wet granulation train, in today's high shear granulation technology, they have successfully used continuous granulation technologies just to solve those quality issues, and they never had a batch failure. So for these companies, even if they've been a generic company in a highly competitive product space, they could gain a lot of tremendous success with this by just driving the yield. Going back to the yield goes into the quality and insofar in the OEE equation, and that drives your business case. Similar for the OTC productivity challenge. So you usually have also here very varying gross margins and high competition, high volumes to go. Opportunities are almost the same as before said. Conversion from wet to granulation to dry compression might be a solution. If you have a cumbersome process, you have the chance to change and reformulate. And OTC and nutraceutical space, this is sometimes much easier than in the prescription drug area, as we know. So again, you have to have a deep dive, a thorough deep dive. I go back to my operational equipment analysis. I say, okay, typical process train, dispensing, blending, granulation, blending, compression, coater, different OEEs of each of these unit operations. Overall, a very poor OEE. How does this look now for continuous? And then I hear many times saying, oh, but Richard, looking into that, the compression machine might be the same. So why is the coder driving this and not the compression machine? Because everything is centered on the compression machine in such a process. Of course, that's correct. So I think the turret RPM and tooling and tablet size, etc., remains the same. But again, the overall process is the game changer. So if you feed your compression machine with non-stop, excellent quality blend without any hassles, this machine can run day and night. And so feeding the coder. If you have to scale it out, you say, okay, I put another compression machine next to it or another process train. You just duplicate the capacity, or you have a double-sided press instead. You can do scale up by feeding this with the same blending device. So here are scalability opportunities which you can, going back to my net present value assessment, try to map out with the net present value. Yeah, batch. So let's assume this batch operation has an OEE of 50%, just to give a number. As continuous equipment, particularly if you have another double-sided machine or whatever in place, let's say it's a bit more expensive, but you run the same equipment with the same OEE, you will see a difference in the net present value over the years. And this is just because of the initial investment, which is higher for a Conti system. If this is 10%, 50%, 25%, whatever. So this makes the delta over the years. So now, again, let's assume you can operate the whole equipment with this on the same price level for whatever combination. It will look like this, but you scale it out now. Let's say you have two of the same kind of continuous manufacturing trains in place with the higher capacity to be sold. You can gain a surplus in net present value. And so with this example, you basically can develop a scenario, whether scale out or scale up, whatever is the preference for your case. How does this look like into the monetization? It's just a game of capacity you gain and you can sell more. And here the equipment value is no more the real driving parameter. It's really the capacity increase with the driving parameter for your business case. Last but not least, let's look into the CDMO business segment. So for CDMOs, of course, totally different competitive arena. There are more products in the development pipeline, so this will hit the CDMOs someday when their customers coming in say, hey, I have developed something on a continuous process platform. You have to support me to supplying that. Or you have the small innovators who say, hey, I do not want to invest myself into a brick and mortar building. Let's work together on a plan how to share equipment, for example, just to lower the risk of investment, or to a solution for limited knowledge and resources, which you usually find in this continuous arena. The opportunity here is that for CDMOs, the advantage is to expand their service portfolio to their customers if they have already, let's say, knowledge and technology on the starting point. I go back to this tech transfer case. So let's assume again, you are in the position that you have to decide for an investment. You have always to know that it takes a while to get this asset qualified, validated, and online. This is a negative at the beginning. If you would have already a visionary thought to put already this technology in place, you gain faster learning how to use this asset. And then if you have an existing asset and the customer shows up on your doorstep and say, hey, can you help me? You're immediately there. You can immediately help and support this customer on their journey. And you can, for sure, develop a nice net present value to cover your investment very early on. Or you share it as well, or someone just says, okay, I have parts of the equipment. Let's help to set up such a line. So wherever is your service specialty, as soon as you get started, it's better for you. There are more products coming. This is also shown on the ETT filed product lists. So the business case for CDMO is to have this asset on start, to be prepared when the customer is coming. There's also, of course, support possible for the small innovators which do not have the assets or do not want to employ assets. The CDMO is really an important business segment to enable continuous manufacturing applications today and in the near future. Yeah, so I basically walked you through to 4 business case examples. I hope I showcased that with the net present value method and the way to compare your investment to an existing technology, you can showcase where are the areas of the delta. And by doing this exercise, you will learn what parameters are driving the business case for your company and for your competitive situation. There are many times questions like, is there a universal business case for continuous? I would say, of course, all the benefits are universal, and you can find in each segment similarities. But in a nutshell, understanding the competitive arena all of these companies are in, you will also consequently understand that you can't simply compare all of them. This is why it is so crucial to apply this model or this scenario technique to each of your company's situation. I also want to highly encourage everyone to look in this value chain of your company itself and to see for which sections in your value chain you consider continuous manufacturing will have an effect, from development to production to commercial production. Most people would say that's the area. But if you have a closer look, it can also have impact on your inbound, outbound, on your production portfolio. So it has many side effects to consider why it is so important to not just look into the operational costs alone. Yeah, with this simple financial tool, you can map out your case. And while doing this, you will learn what is for my company the most important element. We also said, okay, there are benefits in development, tech transfer. I think everybody understands these many times repeated benefits, but the monetarization of those benefits is key of this exercise. And my conclusion for this is also very simple. You will find that every of these implementations are kind of start with your product. So you have to think continuous manufacturing by starting with the product, the recipe, followed by the process, and not just because of you think that's continuous manufacturing is considered to be something of advantage in all spaces. You have to do this exercise very diligently to see how this kind of technology can improve your business situation. Yeah, with this, I want to conclude my presentation. And I'm, of course, happy for now questions and discussions around this topic.